Colorism impacts both men and women on different levels. Access to jobs, how you're treated by the police, how you are perceived in society, social profiling. Colorism is very real. But when it comes to women, I usually hear colorism talked about the most and complained about the most in context of relationship, and more importantly, in context of how beautiful a woman is perceived or not perceived. But when it comes to dating and mating, while I won't pretend that colorism isn't necessarily at play, I really believe that pretty privilege is worse than colorism. And let me explain. If we're talking about dating and mating in Black America specifically, men have made it pretty clear what they want. A natural woman, a woman who takes care of herself, has her own natural hair, doesn't go crazy in the makeup. Like, men are usually pretty simple. And at the end of the day, a dark-skinned woman who was perceived as beautiful, or dark-skinned woman who was perceived as more conventionally attractive, it's not to say she won't have certain experiences with colorism, but at the end of the day, she's still going to get a lot of play. Most Black men aren't turning down Nia Long, Lupita Nyong'o, even Naomi Campbell when she was really in her prime. Like, think about these different, beautiful, dark-skinned women who certainly experience colorism as a result of being in a white society, but were still very desired by men. And this is the thing about it. I mean, because when we talk about this stuff, we're really, really concerned about the way it impacts our dating and mating options, and it impacts the way that we are perceived as far as beautiful. Pretty privilege, in my opinion, is what will impact women the most. Now, of course, pretty privilege, it can include skin tone, and depending upon the individual and the race and everything, that can come into play. But at the end of the day, a dark-skinned woman who is considered conventionally attractive, has beautiful skin, has a beautiful figure, has a beautiful face. We compare her to maybe a lighter-skinned woman who is not considered as attractive, maybe doesn't have the body type that's ideal, maybe doesn't have the features that are ideal, maybe doesn't have any of that stuff. The dark-skinned woman is probably going to win out. And so often I think the two are conflated, and it's not true, because there are certainly dark-skinned women out there who know that they're beautiful and are treated as beautiful and get the male gaze. And there are also light-skinned women out there who are femcells and who don't feel like they get the male gaze, and they feel like they are overlooked. And so the two are not the same. And that's why I'm saying, I personally think that pretty privilege is worse than colorism when you are talking dating and mating. Why? Because while men will consider skin tone, most Black men, if you're talking about dating and mating in the Black American world, they just want you to be pretty. They just want you to be pretty. They don't care if you're dark or light. I mean, they just want you to be considered pretty. Now, where colorism and skin tone can start to be more of an issue is if, as a Black woman, you decide that you want to date and marry into another ethnicity or into another race who very much practices colorism, where colorism is very much a part of their culture. That's where you might start seeing colorism more blatantly smack dab in your face. Especially if you want to date and mate hypergamously. If you're a dark-skinned Black woman and you want to date a upper middle class or a upper class, maybe white man or Asian man or Arab man, yeah, you might start to see colorism a little bit more clearly. And I think so often when we talk about colorism, we can just really blame men. But really, I think sometimes we blame Black men because we're upset that we're not getting some of the different play that we want from other cultures. And Black men can become a scapegoat. And it's so interesting that Black men are usually blamed of being the most colorist, but at the same time, they are still the most likely group of men out there to actually marry and date Black women more than any other race of men. Black men are 80 times more likely to marry a Black woman more than any other race of men today. But if you're talking about dating and mating in Black America, yeah, there might be people who are going to have preferences. But at the end of the day, Black men are just looking for a nice, beautiful, attractive sister. And if she dark-skinned, if she medium, or she light-skinned, they don't care. As long as she's considered pretty, got a nice body, maybe got a nice behind, they're cool. And this is why, again, I think pretty privilege really is the elephant in the room. That's the bigger problem when it comes to how Black women are being impacted in the dating and mating market. It's whether or not they are considered pretty. And another thing too is that so often people like to hide their bad attitude behind colorism. And this is another thing that I think can be problematic. As I mentioned before, colorism is real, it is. But if you do not have good interpersonal relationship skills, if you don't know how to get along, if you are incredibly combative, if you are always arguing at somebody, if you refuse to learn how to get along, if you refuse to compromise, that has nothing to do with colorism. That just has to do with you being very hard to deal with. And if you are a beautiful woman, if you're a beautiful dark-skinned woman physically, but you have a very combative attitude and you refuse to get along with the person, you can't go and then now blame that on colorism if guys don't want to give you the time of day. Because that doesn't have to do with your skin tone. It has to do with you. And this is where I think sometimes, again, the two can be conflated. So no, colorism is not bad attitude. Colorism is strictly you being perceived a certain way based upon the color of your skin. If you're hard to deal with, don't blame that on colorism. As a Black person in a white-dominated society, of course you're going to experience colorism. But if you date and marry within your own ethnic group, the colorism you experience is probably going to be at its least. If you decide to try to date and marry out, the colorism you experience is probably going to be at its highest. But for those beautiful dark-skinned women who are considered conventionally attractive by Black men and even from men outside of the race, they still usually have an opportunity to find the kind of love and the kind of results that they want, especially if they are agreeable. But the good news is, whether you are dark-skinned, light-skinned, considered to be the most beautiful thing out there, or maybe not considered the most conventionally attractive, there's still going to be men out there who would be happy to settle down with you if you were a good woman. If you were a good woman that has good quality, good character, is humble, knows how to get along with people, there are plenty of men who would be happy to be with a woman like that, even if she's not going to grace the cover of a magazine. So you don't have to be light-skinned and you don't have to be a supermodel to find love or to find happiness. You just have to be a good woman and to be open to the options that come to you. But what do you think? Do you agree or do you disagree? Let me know. Leave your questions, comments, concerns in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later. Bye.